You're live.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't think we have any special messages or anything this morning. I am going to start with roll call. So Dennis DeVito, are you here?
Where are
Here.
you? Are you having problem?
I'm here.
Joan McInerney? Here. Doug Blacker?
Okay, let me say this.
Here.
Jack Slager?
Here.
I'm here. Adam Decker?
Here.
Tagi Arshami? Tagi? You're muted. Tagi, you're muted.
It looks like he's on the phone. He might be talking to Denny.
Yeah, well, we see him. He's here. Denny Cobb is not here yet. Brian Blazik.
Yeah.
Did I miss anyone? Okay. Approval of the minutes is next, but we have decided to defer those until the town has a minute taker. And so I'll turn it over to Tagi. Are you with us yet? Tagi, you realize you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. As Denny, I was saying that Denny evidently has issues with the link. He cannot come in, so I'm sending him, as we speak, a copy of my link. I just sent it, and he's going to try my version of the link and see if he can get in. We had the same problem last time. I don't know why, but so let me. He should be on momentarily. Although I can't understand his. I saw his name on the list. Maybe he was muted. Okay, good morning, everybody. And this is, we are really, I am excited. I'm going to share some good news today. This has been a long process, and I certainly appreciate all of your work. We are sitting sort of, I am seeing sort of the end of the tunnel. And so we will have a good discussion, hopefully, and we can move forward. So for today's agenda, Denny's gonna provide you with an analysis of traffic impact. You have seen this information before, sort of in our last presentation, but this time it's gonna be real and with cost associated with it. We're gonna finalize the projects listing and cost estimate on that. We will also separate the cost based on growth related costs and existing deficiencies cost. And we will also calculate the trip cost. And I do have we did have a little boo-boo, but Danny's going to talk about in whenever we have all these different things are all linked, a million different numbers. These things happen, and so you will see a couple of slides different than what what I had sent you previously, and we literally updated those slides this morning in a rush at 9:45. And so you will, but overall is we're still going to see the final trip costs, and I will share uh, some observations that we have made as a result of comparing this round with the previous round, and have some explanation about the reasoning behind these some of the differences that exist. I know most of you weren't involved last time. I know Brian was, and I think he's going to be pleasantly surprised.
Yes, I
And,
am.
huh?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Uh, and our next scheduled meeting is for October 1. And what we are going to discuss that is basically depend on what you make a decision, or how much time we are going to have today to hear what Adam or Attorney Decker has made that briefing, which all of you have received and seen. So with that in mind, I I'm going to sort of recap where we were, and we have gone through the assessment. We have gone through estimating future demands. You have gone through what improvements are needed, and this round today we are looking at what those improvements cost are, and and then we will have our next step that I'm hoping that we will get done next two meetings will be to determine the fee and the charge per EDU. I want to just refresh your memory and remind you that these are our assumptions that you have reviewed, and that is the anticipated development service units. That's what we discussed, and I want you to remember the 738 number EDU from this number when we get to sort of the end of our presentations, because I want to I'm going to talk about it, and as a part of our observation, and so that's for commercial. So these were our costs. These are for the cost determination of the services. These were our assumptions, and then Denny's going to talk about the rest of our assumption based on his analysis. Is Denny here?
Yep, I'm here.
Great. It's all yours, Denny, and then I'll jump back when we get to that. I think it's slide number 10 when we have the total deficiencies. And you haven't seen this. I was able to update the slides. Go ahead.
Okay, so remember that in this process, the first step we have to do is to identify and correct all deficiencies that will exist in 10 years based on existing traffic conditions anticipated at that point, not including any further development in the town. And so what we do account for in what we call background traffic, which is traffic mostly from outside of the town, but also there's some element of growth of traffic inside the town, just as things change demographically within the town. For instance, younger families grow up, and as they grow up, kids become teenagers, and then becomes another car in the household that starts making trips. or one-income families become two-income families, and therefore perhaps a second car is necessary. In addition to that, we have some substantial development in the Lures Farm subdivision, which is about 1,000 units that are just outside of the town that will impact some of the town streets. So we've taken all of that into consideration. Next slide, Tagi. So the intersections that we found with deficiencies are White Oak and 93rd. In 10 years, we'll need to install a traffic signal and add a 100-foot left turn lane extension. At 93rd and 41, we'll add a second left turn lane on the west approach and a right turn lane. And in the process of transitioning that back, we'll also be doing a left turn lane at Kyleman. At Klein and 93rd, a roundabout will be installed. At Blaine and 93rd, we'll need to add a right turn lane on the west approach of about 400 foot in length. At 101st and Blaine, we'll change that from a two-way stop condition to a four-way stop condition. At 109th and 41, we'll add 300 foot to the present right turn lane on the west approach and make that into a through lane, which will mean that we'll need to then add about 1,000 foot of lane on the other side so that we'll get full use of the two through lanes. Next slide, Tagi. So these costs for each of those items that I mentioned are about $6.8 million, and they're listed individually. Next slide, Tagi. Okay, here is something I found a mistake this morning. I thought that what happened is I read off of a long line and I transferred the traffic volume from 109th east of 41 to 109th west of 41. So I thought I had a deficiency on 109th, but that is not the case, and we'll show that correction a little later. Unfortunately, I caught that this morning as Tagi and I were talking about what were the differences between the last time and this time. Next slide, Tagi. So that cost of $7.4 million roughly will now go into the deficiencies for 10 years instead of the existing deficiencies. Next slide, Tagi. And likewise, then our total estimated cost to correct existing deficiency is now only $6.785,300, not 14. Next slide, Tagi. So let me stop at that point. Does anybody have any questions on what we have to do to the existing roadway network to take care of the existing conditions, which is essentially a baseline set of improvements?
This is Dennis. I do have a question. On the 109th and US 41 intersection, can you explain that again, please?
Yes. On the west approach, there is a left turn lane, a through lane, and a right turn lane. And we need to get a second through lane across that intersection in order to get our level of service up. And so the way to do it is to convert that right turn lane into a through lane. And we'll do that by adding about 300 foot back to the west. So it'll be now about a 600, I'm sorry. Nope, 2 slides back, Tuggy. There we go. So we'll add about 300 foot to the present right turn lane, and we'll convert that into a right and through lane. And then we have to add another lane on the other side of the intersection for them to go in, and then we have to drop that lane to get back to one lane eastbound before you get to the railroad bridge. Is that clear?
So what you're saying is the east side of that road will have 5 lanes? There's 3 plus 1 right now, to be 3 plus 2?
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, can you go
So
back, can you go back one slide then for a second? So the 7.4 million on roadway segments in this presentation, it goes to zero, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies on this. Like I said, I caught it this morning and it was just too late to get all the slides corrected.
No, that's okay.
So now we've got the existing deficiencies identified and the corrections that we need to do for those. So what we do now is go forward with the development that we have been talking about, and we've decided how much development, and that was on Taki's previous slides that he showed you. We've generated the trips, we've talked about that, and we've distributed trips onto the street network. Now, so we assume in our analysis that what we said in the deficiencies for the existing traffic has been built. And so now this is additional deficiencies that will need to be accommodated, which is what the traffic impact fee will fund. And so now at this point, we had put in a roundabout at 93rd and Klein under the existing deficiencies, but now we have to have from a single lane to a dual lane roundabout. So at 93rd and Klein, it'll be a dual lane roundabout with dual lanes in all three approaches. At 93rd and Blaine, we now need a traffic signal, and we need some additional turn lanes. For the approach on the south, we need dual left turn lanes northbound. We need to extend on the west approach the eastbound right turn west all the way back to Klein. Because we have dual left turn lanes coming up from the south, we'll need to have two through lanes going to the west to Klein. So this section, and we'll talk about this in the roadway segments in a minute, will go to actually 4 lanes between Klein and Blaine. At 101st and Blaine, so we're going south on Blaine, we're going to change that 4-way stop to a traffic signal, and then we're going to add a right turn lane on the north approach and a left turn lane on the west approach. At 93rd and 41, this is a biggie, because in order to solve the problems there for level of service on the 93rd approach, we would have to add a through lane in both directions, east and west. This would create a huge impact on businesses and homes in the area between the tracks and west of Kyleman. So we talked with the town, and we decided that just is not a feasible thing to do, and it would have too much damage to the fabric of the community to consider doing this. And so for this particular deficiencies, there is no feasible improvement. At 101st and Klein, we would put in a roundabout. At 109th and White Oak, we now have a traffic signal warrant. At 109th and 41, now we need to add, in addition to the stuff we just talked about, we need to add an eastbound right turn lane on the west side of the road, and now we have to add a westbound through lane to go over to the west. At 109th and Parish, NDOT has a roundabout planned to go in there. But to their roundabout, we will have to add an additional lane on the northbound and southbound approach so that it will operate at a good level of service. Okay, next slide, Taki.
This is Dennis. I have a question there. 2 questions, please. 109th and 41. Didn't we just talk about that? Is this in addition to those lanes?
Yes. Yes.
So there'll be a 6th lane at that intersection?
Yes. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Secondly, I've been on record as being anti-roundabout, but I'm going to put that aside and just ask a very simple question. In a dual roundabout, do you expect two cars to be going around that roundabout at the same time, or just wider for one car?
No, it is
What is a
actually
dual,
two lanes.
what exactly is a dual roundabout?
It is, as the name would imply, you have two lanes circulating in the roundabout. It's a much more complex roundabout than a single. But a single is only good for certain volume, and then once you get past that, you have to have another lane in that roundabout.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on the intersection deficiencies? Okay. So the cost for the intersection deficiencies is about $2.8 million. And these are identified here. Next slide, Tuggy. So now the segments in 10 years with full development that we've projected, 93rd Avenue from White Oak to west of 41, where we've improved it in the existing condition. So we'd be widening this to 3 to 4 lanes, essentially be a 3-lane section with perhaps additional right turn lane from White Oak to that point. 93rd from Klein to Blaine, we talked about this a little bit more, we'll actually be making that 4 lanes in between those two intersections. Next slide. Blaine.
Denny, yeah, I'm sorry to be confused here, but we talked about 93rd Klein to Blaine, 4 lanes in a previous slide. Are we paying for it twice?
No. It's the same. I talked about it in the intersection. So I'm just saying in a segment analysis, the segment will have 4 lanes. But no, we're not double counting on the cost.
Thank you.
Back up one, Toggy. Yeah, 93rd. Okay, we got those. Next one. Blaine, from 93rd down to 101st, we provided a dual left turn lane up at the intersection, and then from there, we're going to go 3 lanes down to 101st, where we've added, we talked about where we needed that right turn lane on Blaine to get onto 101st, and then a left turn lane on 101st to get up to Blaine. And then 101st, or Joliet, between Klein and Blaine, that will go to a 3-lane section. Next slide. Calumet Avenue, on the other side of town, from 101st down to the south town limits. We're going to need to do some work in that intersection. We're going to need to provide a 100-foot westbound left turn lane with a left turn signal. We're going to need to extend on the other side of the intersection the eastbound right turn lane 300 feet. And then on the south approach, the Calumet Avenue approach, we'll need to be providing dual left turns for northbound. And then from there, south, we'll have a 3-lane section to the south town limits. Okay, next. So the cost for these, all of this is 10.430, but we have to add 7.4 to this. So we're going to be somewhere around the neighborhood of $17.8 million for the roadway segment cost. Next slide.
Denny, may I ask a question about Joliet? Nowhere in here
Sure.
do you talk about Joliet. Are you suggesting that in the next 10 years, you don't anticipate any need for improvement on that road?
That is correct.
That that seems contrary, considering all the homes that are being built in this immediate area and to the immediate. Well, I understand Joliet's going to get a lot of the output from that farm, Christmas tree farm. Or am I misstating the road? Is that 92nd or it's going to be Joliet?
No, I think that's Joliet. I'm looking at my data. It looks like I'm projecting that road, the traffic count station we've got had about 7,700 cars both ways, and that's going to go to about 9,700 cars. And a 2-lane road will accept that much traffic.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I mean, it's a good question because you do have that stuff from Lord's Farm, and I've accounted for that, saying that will be going through and some of it will be using Joliet to get to 41. So, and I apologize for the confusion here, but essentially the 10-year deficiency cost for the existing is $6.785 million. And then the growth-related intersection cost is 2.7. And so, yeah, total estimated is total of those two numbers. Next slide. Tucky, looks like you were able to. No, we didn't. So the
Yes, we
growth
did.
relate. Yeah, I did.
Yes,
You
we
did.
did. This is the one I was able to update.
Okay. So the roadway improvement costs that are subject to the impact fee are $17.8 million. Okay, next slide. So then our total fee that is going total improvement cost that's going to be subject to the fee is about $20,579,000.
Yeah.
Next slide.
This slide clearly shows what is the existing deficiencies and what's the total deficiencies in terms of all over next 10 years. And we cannot fund that 6 million, but the $20 million will be the growth related costs that can be funded.
So then we looked at the trips generated from all of the different zoning land uses, and those total to 57,738. So the next slide is just, I believe, the simple arithmetic of dividing the total cost, which includes that $20,579,000, and then the cost to do the study, you add that to it, and then, so that brings down your total cost is $20,744,335. You divide that by the number of trips generated, and you come up with the impact fee per trip, and it's $359.28.
So Denny, what's the unit of measure on the 57,000?
That's a trip.
Those are the number of trips per day.
Thank you.
And for clarification's sake, that number was 231.65 prior to this?
Yes. And the difference is that $7 million, that big project on 109th moved from the town's responsibility to the development responsibility. And that's why that number went up.
All right, I'm assuming that that someone will be sending out a updated version of all of this?
Yeah, I can send you that. If you look at your handout for this slide that I have right now up, and that $7 million in your handout is shown here under the 10-year existing, and we just shifted it to the other side. But I will send you an update.
Yeah, because it appears to me that a few of these slides are changing. 57. That just, the only thing that changed was a division then?
It basically being in the wrong box.
Okay.
One cost was in the previous version that you currently have was assumed to be an existing deficiency, while it should have been under the growth column.
All right, if you can go to the, total again, please. One more. That one. The number is not, let me change my slide here.
Yeah, you should show about $239, I believe it was.
231.
231, yes.
231.65.
Hey, Taggy, this
I'm
is
writing these
Jack.
numbers down on my sheet. Hang on, please.
Hey, Taggy, this is Jack. I remember going through this 2 years ago, similar process, and I want to say the number we came up with was closer to $80 million. Am I off, or did something happen in the last 2 years that the number changed
Wasn't it-
that dramatically?
Wasn't it 81 million?
Yes, it was, good, Jack, good morning. Yes, and that's, we're gonna talk about it the next slide, what happened. I've called it, let's talk about what happened. And that's, we have, God knows how much we've had, conversation between myself and Denny about, going back and forth and make sure that we did not make a mistake anywhere, and these are really complicated stuff. Hundreds, if not thousands, of calculations had to be done, and so this is the number, and we will get to it the next slide. I want to make sure everybody sees this. If there is any questions, we can answer, because whenever we get to this number, I sort of get to a significant amount of relief, and also I feel ashamed that I had to put you through all of this stuff that you had to go through to get to this number. Any questions and about the process we went through and to get to this 359.28? No? Okay. Now, you do not have this slides, and again, I should have, these were all part of my conversations and talking with Denny, but I thought this morning, literally, I thought, well, let me put these in the presentation, and so everybody can better understand what happened. I think from all of you, Brian is the only one that has clearly seen the last number, and Jack, you were in a couple of presentations, and you had seen the $80 million, or the infamous $80 million, and so we have gone through a lot of observations, discussions, and see what does explain this reduction. And so I have sort of come up with 5 explanations, and that describes what happened. Number 1 explanation is that the town has actually absorbed significant amount of land since last assessment. I've called it assessment, last round of work that we did. We know that the town has built for the last 5 years over 1,200 housing units. In the last, which becomes part of the existing, in the last analysis, this 1,200 units of housing was future development. So that came in as a future development. A second item on the commercial side, we have added 96,000 square feet of commercial uses. You recall when we started this, I brought to your attention that 738 number. Those were the EDUs. When you look at that, 96 of those, it would have been more if we had an additional 96 units of commercial uses. So that is another sort of reduction that we have seen for the last 4 or 5 years. Those are sort of one item in terms of the amount, increasing the amount of existing development. Number two, since these have been developed, the capacity of the town for development has declined or has decreased. Other words, the town has not annexed equal amount of land to have the same capacity for development. We know the town has annexed about 250 acres of land, and very few of it, like maybe 50 of it, has been actually built, and so the other 200 is still vacant. And so that capacity of the town has not increased. And we see this in two different numbers. So if you look at the last assessment that we did, the total capacity of the town was over 9,121 EDUs. When we calculated everything, today's the total capacity, and you've seen that the total capacity of the town is 8,314, almost about 1,000 EDUs less. So that also one sort of one element or one contributing factor to the overall development pattern in the town. There is also changes in the traffic pattern, and Denny, feel free to chime in. The overall this traffic pattern is changed, or the number of trips have changed due to overall growth of the town, and also traffic from neighboring areas. And
That's
I think
exactly
Denny,
right, Toddy, yeah.
and
had-
then you mentioned something. Go ahead, Denny.
We've had 5 years, I think, since we did the last counts. And so those conditions have increased your existing volumes. We've done, the town has done a number of improvements already. The roundabout at Parish, for instance, the intersection improvements at Calumet and 101st. And so that has helped decrease the deficiencies that we had before. The last one, and maybe I'll start here, and Taki, you can kind of finish. We've done a more thorough job this time in looking at the development capacity for the town than the first time around. I think the first time around we were given direction by the town manager that, put all of this development into place. And the second time around, we looked at our 10-year past data and remember our discussions that we come up with a number of what we thought we could absorb. And that was greatly different than what was used in the prior set of computations. For instance, we had something in the neighborhood of 167,000 total trips the last time. And now we have 57,000. And that is, a lot of that is based on the reduced amount of commercial that we've identified as what we could absorb in the town in the next 10 years. The other is a reduction in the residential. Last time we used 100% of it. This time we used less of it. Plus, we've had 1,200 of those units already developed. So those two combined, I think we have a more realistic picture than what was given to us as an assumption in the first go around, and that's why these numbers are hugely different.
Yeah, and I want to add a couple other items I think we have since then that we have realized or have changed that have significantly changed these numbers. First of all, as Danny said, the trends that we were given by the town is going to be full development. We did not have an anticipated development and a 10-year anticipated development table last time. And because we were under the sort of the trend was as such that, yes, the town will be fully developed. And the other item that has impacted, and it was also included last time, and since then the 10-year data is showing us, and that is a lot of these developments, proposed developments, are much smaller than what was, particularly on the plan side, what was on that time we assumed. Perhaps the best example is the Boyer development. Boyer development on 45 years ago, we had 250,000 square feet, 256,000, I believe. It was the total development for Boyer property. That is down to 100,000. Somebody's laughing, I don't know who it is, but that's 150,000 additional square foot of commercial, especially with those activities that 5 years ago was proposed for that. That included, for example, a sort of huge, humongous brewery with bars, with activities going on. And that has also has not only has shrunk, but those uses, potential uses, have changed. So it is, not least of which is, I think, your contributions, your comments. We had 2 meetings ago talking about future commercial development. That also contributed to a much better, more reliable, more reasonable assessment of anticipated future development. So that is...
Tuggy,
Yeah.
Tuggy, this is Dennis. I'm trying to wrap my head around a 75% reduction in need. And what I heard you say, I think, putting in my words, that by waiting, the town took care of a lot of the problems. And secondly, the town didn't grow fast enough. The town did not annex enough property to justify the original assessment.
Well,
But
yeah,
somehow or other,
annexation is a result. You have to have development. So yes, your first statement in terms of the town did not develop fast enough, that is absolutely correct.
And is the other thing, right, is that what was previously expected growth, some of that is now built into the baseline, right?
That's correct.
so if you're pragmatic, you can say if you wait and do nothing, the problem's going to take care of itself.
Maybe.
Well, I think one of the other item, it's a sort of silver lining in this. You have done a couple of projects, you have done some improvements, and you can see those improvements if it is a strategic, have significant impact on traffic.
Well, let me ask this. If the town annexed more property, would this number go up? You said it went down because it didn't annex. So if the town went out and annexed a couple hundred acres, this number goes up?
The
Yes,
capacity of the town will go up. The anticipated development is still going to be governed by the overall development pattern in the town.
But I think, Tagi, what you said is when this process was done 5 years ago, that the town had given you direction to assume the entire town was going to be fully developed. Is that correct? In 10 years? And
Yes, and roughly it is, yes.
And that was just a very ballpark direction, I think, that just was way out of the ballpark. It wasn't even close to what actually happened. That's how I'm understanding that. Is that correct?
I think so, and I don't want to blame the town necessarily, but this is a learning process, and we have more data. We have 10-year data today that we did not have
Right.
that time.
Well, and I think the other thing is that 5 years ago, Boyer was coming forward with his development. There was a lot of anticipation that St. John was getting hot as far as development goes. And while this study could only be defined by the town's borders, I think the outlook was, well, if we develop everything, that'll give us the more conservative approach in getting the fee to get the improvements. And we've changed that around to looking at not necessarily if you build it, they'll come, but rather how much are we absorbing? And so it's a different outlook on the development potential. And where's reality? Who knows? It may be somewhere in between, because as a couple of you have cited, this study doesn't take into account any additional annexed areas that may occur in the next 5 years. And so in the previous way that was looking at it, in a way, took care of that. So I wouldn't be too hard on the previous directions, but on the other hand, I think that the way we've looked at it this time, and this board was much more detailed about that, I think is a better, more reasonable, more logical approach to determining the development capacity for the town.
Jamie, what is the impact in the next 5 years if the town proceeds with the current plan and bond issue to actually improve the 41 93rd intersection and the roads associated with that intersection? What kind of impact, if any, is that going to have, short of reducing the cost? What impact, if any, is that going to have on the overall study?
That's imputed in the cost that the town is responsible for. So it's already accounted for. Since the town, we're anticipating that the town will go forward with that.
I understand. Well, is that the assumption that was made and built into the study?
Yes.
Okay.
That sometime in the next 10 years, that those improvements would be made to 93rd there at 41.
Would it have an impact if the next 5 years or the next 3 years?
No. It's from the perspective of this study, we look at the conditions of 10 years, okay?
Okay,
And,
okay,
and right now, your level of service is F. And so you need those improvements sooner rather than later. But when you go out 10 years and you look at what you need, remember I said that we had a proposal for a project that would take care of things 10 years out for the existing conditions, but it was just too expensive and too, it would have involved probably using eminent domain and condemnation because of the complexities of the purchases. You'd be buying whole properties and moving people, and we got direction from the town that that just wasn't going to happen.
okay.
And that's in the previous time when we did this, I can remember Steve Kill saying, for instance, I think we're going to widen, because the additional trips, we were going to widen Joliet, okay? And I can remember Steve Kill saying at the time, that is never going to happen. This town will never do that because it's just too intrusive into the existing residents' homes. And Taggy and I talked about this in this go-around, and we said, you know, if something's not feasible, then why should we include it in the cost? Because it'll never get done. And so that's why we decided on the 93rd corridor, for instance, not to include the more expensive and intrusive project because it just wasn't going to get done. So that thinking then resulted in less improvements. The other thing is we've upped our threshold to go from 2 lanes to 3 lanes. And before it was somewhere around about 14,000. Now it's in the neighborhood of 15,000 to 18,000 before we go up. And the same thing at the upper end of that to go to 4. So stuff that went to 4 lanes under the previous one because of the lower threshold, or higher threshold, I'm sorry, is now 3 lanes. So that's another element in how's come these costs have come down so drastically.
Denny, couldn't you also say that building improvements not at 93rd Street there, but around it are going to take a lot of the pressure off of 93rd Street that might have been there in previous scenarios? Like, you know, the road that's going to go through Shops 96 will take a lot of traffic that might be going through 93rd right now.
Yes.
Well,
So
it's,
then-
you know, go ahead, Joan.
So the net impact of significantly reduced costs by about 75% and a third or 2/3 reduction in the trips. We went from like a 490 number impact down to 359. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well,
Sorry, this is Craig. Sorry, I'm joining you guys a little bit late this morning. I'm not feeling 100% this morning. So how does that translate out to a typical single-family house, or say a small professional office, for example?
These are the things we're going to talk about next week or next meeting, Craig. That is, so yeah, it basically, we do know that for a single family residential right now, I think it's about, that's 1 unit and that's about 10 trips. So for if you multiply this number by 10, that would be roughly a single family rate, $3,500. Correct me if I'm wrong, Denny.
Nope, you're right.
And this is if the fee is applied at 100% of the recommendation,
Yes.
or of what am I going to say? The available fee that we can collect based on statute. If this is if 100% of that is collected.
That's correct. Yeah, we will have several tables, scenarios in our next meeting using this number as a base, and also discuss sort of fee options in our next meeting if nothing else comes up for the next meeting. Any other thoughts, comments?
This is Dennis. I'm still trying to grab my head around the overview here. And a few things come to mind. One is, and it may not be the exact responsibility of this particular committee, but to just look at the 93rd and 41 intersection and throw up your arms and say there's nothing that can be done, that becomes a town issue. But it's sad to say that nothing can be done there. There's no feasible improvement. Secondly, I'm looking at, I'm coming back to the double roundabouts. I spent some time in Florida in the villages where they have numerous double roundabouts. And my experience is the inner lane is almost useless. Because you get to the inner lane, you can't get back out to get out to your turn. I would really be concerned in this area for the very first double roundabout because it's going to be deadly. And the fact that the town hasn't annexed land affects our decision doesn't make a lot of sense either. Because if the town, what you said was if the town had annexed another 50 or 100 acres, this number would be bigger.
The
This is Den.
Yeah, go ahead then.
This is Denny. Let's talk about the roundabout. Then, Tagi, you can talk about the rules as far as the annexation goes. But in the case of the roundabout, you're going to have two in your town in the next 5 years that are going to be dual lane roundabouts. And that's going to be US 231 or 109th and Parrish and Klein. And those are both scheduled by NDOT to be online in about 5 years. We're talking out 10 years. So there will be some opportunity for some of the residents at any rate to have experience with driving a multi-lane roundabout. Now, I'm a traffic engineer, and the first time I approached one of these things, I had to really do some head scratching real quick to figure out where I was going. But and I'm a traffic engineer, but as the years have gone by, and I've learned how to do this, and that's what it takes is traveling through these. And Dennis, I understand you don't want to really be the first guy on the block to have one of these. Valparaiso is a good testament to that. And from what I hear, I believe that their residents are able to negotiate that roundabout okay now. But it takes a learning curve for the residents. And the maybe fortunate thing is that NDOT's already got two of them on the books that will probably get built in the next 5 years. So there'll start to be some experience gained with that. And Tagi, you want to talk about the annexation issue?
Yeah, the annexation, Dennis, is the town has traditionally annexed land on a volunteer basis. That is, developers come in and tell the town, annex us. We want you to annex this piece of land for future development, and then they submit plans for that future development and do it. So it is, even if the town decides to go and annex involuntarily, take other not unincorporated areas land and bring it in, development not necessarily going to happen. And plus, the town then becomes responsible to provide services, utilities, and everything else for the land that is not being developed, and that's not an efficient way of running the government. So that is sort of the catch-22 situation where the town or every town is facing.
Well, and if I may inject, and correct me if I'm wrong, Taggy, but in 5 years, this will all be reviewed by a review committee, which is going to consist of an engineer, a CPA, and a real estate person. And the whole scenario will be different by then. You know, the town probably will have expanded. There will be new places to develop and new traffic patterns, but won't they be able to make adjustments to this fee accordingly?
Well, yes. So I think you're in 5 years by statute, if the town decides to continue this impact fee, they have to establish another committee similar to yours right now and basically update this plan. So all of these assumptions, whoever does that new impact fee study, they will have an additional 5 years of trends and observation to follow. I think what you mentioned about the 3 individuals, those are the review boards that they can make certain decisions that the town will have to establish if the road impact fee is adopted by the town council. And that review board will be part of the establishment of the sort of institutional structure for imposing road impact fee. And yes, that review board will have to be an engineer, a developer, and a real estate, or not a developer, a CPA and a real estate person.
So
The other thing I would add is that as these areas come in and become annexed, you're able to charge the same impact fee against that new development. Isn't that right, Taggy?
That's correct.
Can you please explain to me what I've heard, that somehow or other, St. John is expected to annex up until, I think it was 117th or 100, whatever it was, and somehow or other there's agreements on what town gets what land. What exactly is that?
So a state statute for comprehensive plan allows for communities to sort of tag certain area as their future growth boundaries. I think there has been a gentlemanly agreement between several communities here that they each have sort of accepted that this is going to be our future boundary. For St. John, I believe it is 125th. Other words,
That's correct.
yeah, I believe it is 125th. So St. John will have, and south of it, basically that gentlemanly agreement goes to Cedar Lake for their future growth boundary. And so that would be in sort of growth boundary for St. John.
But that's not official. That's just a tentative handshake.
I'm
Dennis,
not really sure if I can say handshake. It is in the plan. It is in the comprehensive plan for the town of St. John as their future growth boundaries.
That's where our sewers reach. That's as far as we can go with our sewer system currently.
A question on the 93rd and US 41, so no feasible improvement. So I know that to do that intersection, we said it would impact homes and businesses, right? And we don't necessarily as a town have a stomach for impacting those homes and businesses, but do we know what that cost would be? Or what was that cost in the last study?
I think I can find that, but I don't have that at the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
I'll have to look for it.
Because are all these others ones that we've identified, either for intersection or road improvements? All of those we're saying the town council does have a stomach to do those type of improvements, even if they impacted.
Yeah, we are anticipating that at the moment. We've got a meeting with Craig next week on Wednesday to go over all of these improvements and what their impacts are. And so at that point, he'll give us kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing. There's one that I am thinking about that might change, and that is the roundabout at Klein and 101st. Because it could involve some right-of-way takings that might be considered to be excessive. And so we'll be going over all of these with Craig. So at next week, we'll be able to present the final dollars on all of the improvements, because there may be one or two other projects that may drop or may change between now and then.
Yeah, I want to also.
Taggy and Danny, can you help me understand again? Just what do you mean by no feasible alternative for 93rd and 41? You may have explained this to me before, but can you just refresh my memory?
Sure. What we've determined could be done is to, on the west approach, to go from a single left turn lane to a dual left turn lane, and to add a right turn lane. And by doing that, we'll be able to get you up to a level of service D. In order to do any better improvements on there, we would need to add an additional through lane in each direction on 93rd. And that's where we start getting into the houses and businesses along the north side, and perhaps more into the church property on the south side. And then also, I think you got a beautician area of a building or something like that between Town Hall and 41. That one may get impacted. So you can see pretty quickly, we're talking about a large impact. And that, when those numbers climb into the millions quickly.
Right. Okay, and that I remember discussing that with you, and when you said the town doesn't have an appetite for that kind of taking, I think that's correct based on my conversations with various council members. So that's kind of where that comes from. I just want to make sure the group kind of has that, background, but I wanted to just make sure I understood that correctly. So.
Wasn't there some planned work there? I heard that something was going on in that intersection. Independent of this group.
Are you referring to the council meeting, the special council meeting earlier this month?
No, it was went back. There was an agreement with the church to move, make another lane there on 93rd.
I don't think that was ever finalized. I think there was some conversation, but I don't know if that was ever finalized.
So what we see is what we get.
Well, we're largely trying to work within the right-of-way that we have and minimize the amount of additional right-of-way needed to make improvements for the time being.
Thank you.
So this is Jack. Can I ask a question? So in in 5 years, we need to do this, we basically need to do the same exercise again that we're doing right now? Or, I know you've called it an update, but we're essentially starting over or reanalyzing the entire town again?
Yes,
It'd be very similar to what we've just gone through. You'd have to update your traffic counts, update your projections for your housing and your commercial, generate the trips, apply them to the network, take into account what has changed since last time. So essentially the process that we are going through right now, you would go through 5 years from now. Right, Toggy?
yes.
Well, I guess, and no offense to you guys, but what I struggle with, and I had this same argument 3 years ago when we were going through this exercise, is it costs the town $175,000 plus to do this every 3 to 5 years, and well, we'll see when we have our next meeting what we're going to generate in revenue, but it really feels like we're not getting anywhere and we're just spending money on studies.
If I'm not mistaken, too, we're allowed to set up to 5% of the fee that's collected aside for necessary engineering and consulting services, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So if we plan ahead, we can begin to set aside enough money to handle the cost of, the anticipated cost of a study at that time. That's just throwing it out there. That's, I think, an option, if I'm not mistaken, based on statute.
Well, and I'm speaking from a planner's point of view now, because I was a planner for 21 years, and it is completely normal for a town to review its comprehensive plan and its traffic studies, et cetera, every 5 years. Because the town is a growing organic thing, probably once we fill in all development and have no more room to grow, that won't be necessary, but I doubt it because needs change all the time. So it's really a good idea to review this kind of a thing every 5 years, as long as you're doing something in between. I sense what you're saying, Jack, is that we do this study and then we do nothing, and then we do another study and we do nothing. Well, the fee didn't get approved last time, so that's why nothing was done there. Hopefully, now that we have better data and we're coming up with a more realistic fee, and it will carry through this time.
Yeah, even then, and we'll have to wait till the next meeting, but even what I recall from last time, once we implement the fee and start to collect it, and the logistics of collecting it and holding it and paying it out, hopefully it's more than $200,000 over the next 5 years, because then all we're doing is paying for the study, and we're not really ever getting to the point of having enough money to do any of the road improvements. That was my argument 3 years ago, and still will be until we see what kind of revenue it's going to generate.
I agree with that. Yes.
Jack, doesn't that depend on the...
Jack, the town already has a parks impact fee. So there are some sort of institutional structure has been built to collect the impact fees. And as you may know, the parks impact fee, they currently collect about $250,000 to $300,000 annually.
Okay.
Jack, this is Dennis. I sympathize with the thought you're bringing up here. You got to put a lot of $2,000 together to get $160,000. Doesn't the real issue come down to who pays, whether it's the town paying for it as the comprehensive plan, or whether it's assessed entirely to this committee? I mean, if this is the only use for this, then you've got a valid point. But I'm assuming that this study will be used for a lot more than just, what we're doing.
I can tell you, Dennis, that basically the council, we're going to absorb, I've kept the guys informed, we're going to absorb this information. We're all, all basically together thinking about the traffic improvements that we can make on a yearly basis. We're planning accordingly. And as a result, we're going to be addressing these issues, and this study will become an important part of what we're looking at once we've concluded it, because we're looking for future projects. The bond issue that we're putting forth now that's up for approval is for that purpose. And we're looking at getting $5.3 million, of which a majority of it is going to be spent on road improvement. So therefore, we're hoping we're going to have money in reserve to be able to address some of these situations. We're going to use this study because Denny put time and effort into it. He's the same in his group as the same ones that have been doing the work for us previously. So they're well aware of everything, and we're going to use this intelligently to accomplish as much as possible for as little cost as possible.
And
And we
that's
also-
commendable, but yeah, that's commendable, but as a group, what portion of that fee should we consider necessary to do our task?
Basically, it's a combination of tasks, Denny. The town is going to use this information for the same reason this committee was established. That's why I pushed so hard years ago. And as Jack said, I told them, don't even bother putting a fee in. It was, at the time they suggested, it was like $380 a unit. It was a waste of time, because by the time you paid for the study at 50 grand a year, there was no money left for any roads. So why bother?
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, Brian. And I guess in hindsight, if there's any benefit to what we did 3 years ago, it identified the high priority roads and intersections that needed to be improved, and some of those were taken care of in the meantime. So I guess it wasn't a complete waste of time and money and effort to go through the exercise 3 years ago, and we're further along now than we were then. So yeah, I guess hopefully when we look back in 5 years, we'll have accomplished a few more.
Well, we have a different thinking and a different philosophy for running this town now. And I think everybody's able to see that. And we're pushing ahead on road projects. That and parks. So.
Yeah, one of the avenues we have seen in other communities, they're using their impact fee as a match for other grants or funds that are available. So locally, then they can do much larger projects and
Well, yeah, that's funny you mentioned that, because we are currently in the process of putting together our applications for funding available through NERC, the Regional Plan Commission, for projects, in 2024 and or 25 and 26. And we are required to come up with a match, for those projects in the event that we receive that funding. And road impact fee money could be used to help, provide the match that we need for those.
Yeah, and those are typically 5-to-1 or 4-to-1. Otherwise, 20% match with 80% funded by state or federal agencies.
Right.
Yeah, I
Well-
just think that the amount of revenue that we've given up in the last 5 years because no action has been taken, well would have covered a $165,000 fee, and we would be way farther ahead from a revenue standpoint if it would have been at a reasonable rate, so.
We should be able to, we should be able to collect hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with this impact fee. Anything less, you know, is just a waste of time and money, as Jack and I both agree. If you don't make the fee substantial enough, when you look at Fishers and you look at Zionsville, their fees are in the $2,000, $3,000 range. And that's where it needs to be in order to make it even worthwhile.
Well, just for the sake of argument, obviously, if you know, we're using I guess a baseline understanding of 300 permits, you know, 300 new permits for just housing alone a year. And let's just say, you know, the fee, just for the sake of argument, the fee is $2,000. That's $600,000 a year.
And that's nice.
You know, and then you multiply that over 5 years, you start to amass enough money to start to do a project.
Right.
Or at least assist with the 20% match for a project down the road, maybe.
Right.
And that would be, yeah, you'd be levering your funds.
Right.
Yeah. If there is no other comments, I put this as a sort of warm up for our next meeting. We are just a reminder that the net cost per EDU multiplied by the number of EDUs that generates the impact fee, and Craig just went through for a single family home at perhaps 50% or less than 50% rate. That's where we're going to talk about mostly next time in our next meeting, and so we are going to look at the different land uses, what that range of fee will be. And we are going to share with some examples, and we will also discuss fee options. So whether you want to, there are several ways you can sort of skin the cat, whether you want to go at full, whether you want to go at 50%, those are your choices, and we will discuss those. And we are going to try to also collect what other communities are charging in some of the information that Attorney Decker had provided you, showed what the fees were in Noblesville and I think Fisher, and we're going to get from other communities, update those for you to at least put it in the context of St. John. And we are already noticed for October 8th meeting. And so that is something you need to make that decision today when your next meeting will be.
Why can't we meet next week,
Yeah.
Aggie?
Huh?
Why can't we meet October 1?
I think you can. I don't know why I made a mistake. Yes,
I'm not available October 1st, so you can do Wednesday if you want.
Who's not available?
Doug,
Oh, Doug, yeah, you've got your medical procedure, correct?
Yes.
The only problem is we have to make sure we advertise, we have to make sure we can get the room and the equipment, and then we have to do advertising, which can be done. It's either that or we meet with 4 members next time.
Doug can always catch up by YouTube if he's unable, he's going to be medically incapacitated. He'll be able to catch up with us just by watching it on YouTube.
Yeah, that's fine. You guys want to go ahead?
Yeah, we have to remember that every week we delay is a week's worth of building permits. We can't charge this fee.
You're exactly correct, Donna.
And we have let this thing slide a little bit, not, because of the coronavirus and et cetera. But I'd like to keep this on track as best we can. So if you're okay with that, Doug, I suggest we meet next week.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah, that's fine. It is, again, I should have put number 1, October 1. That's our mistake. So we will do that. That's already been noticed, and we are scheduled, so we could meet. We are 11:36. I had put a sort of provisional agenda item for Attorney Decker to sort of brief you on those, or you can ask him. I don't know, Donna, if this is the day or what would you like to do? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Can you repeat that? I didn't quite get what you're asking.
I'm sorry, I gotta give you a little bit background information. I had discussed with Brian, and this goes back to a long time. We have had several conversations around 2 topics. And one is whether or not the town can establish 2 separate zones or 2 subzones. And one of those subzones would be primarily a corridor 41, Highway 41 corridor, as a commercial corridor, and the other one would be the rest of the town. The question is whether you can make, or the town can establish that, and you can establish 2 separate fees for that corridor versus the rest of the town. That's one question. And the other question has been whether or not the town has the authority to waive or reduce fees for commercial uses. And those 2 questions, Adam was asked to review them, and he has made a briefing that he has submitted to you for your information.
So you're asking us if we want to have that discussion next week?
That is either today, I know it is, you have 20 minutes. I'm not sure if that is adequate, but or next week, yes.
I don't know, Adam, what do you think? Can you do it in 20 minutes, or does it need more time than that?
Well, I certainly can just provide an outline of
what's included in the email that I believe was circulated to everybody on those two topics. It certainly won't take me 20 minutes to do that. So I'm prepared to answer any questions or to just highlight some of those findings.
Well, I, for one, would like you to highlight,
I
because
think that
that's a lot of information, and it is very good information, but I want to make sure that we're focused on what you intended us to get focused on with that. And if you can at least start the conversation and the thought process by giving us the highlights, that would be good, and perhaps we can, if we need to finish it up next week, then we can do so. How does that sound?
No, that I can certainly do that.
Okay. Let's not waste any time then.
So with regard to the first item that was referenced by Tagi, the Indiana Code does allow the creation of different impact zones as part of the impact fee ordinance. And it provides that there are certain requirements for the establishment of the separate impact zones. Now, in my experience, and based on my review of the suburban Indianapolis communities, most of those impact fee ordinances simply establish a single zone, which is essentially the same area enclosed within the municipal corporate boundaries of those towns. But under the Indiana Code, an impact zone may be established so long as that impact zone meets this very certain requirements. And those requirements are that the impact zone essentially must be a geographical area, and everything included within the geographical area of a zone must be contiguous, which essentially means the area must be as a whole. If you looked at it on a map, you can't create separate impact zones unless that zone is contiguous. There also must be a functional relationship between the components of the infrastructure type. So for roads and bridges, which is, the subject of the impact fee ordinance, there must be some functional relationship between those components within the impact zone itself. And so I think, if we described an impact zone being a commercial corridor like Highway 41, I believe that would provide a reasonable basis in law as far as establishing that functional relationship. And that can be distinguished from much of the rest of the town of St. John, which is primarily residential in character. So I believe that would be possible under the code. The third requirement is that the infrastructure type provides a reasonably uniform benefit throughout the impact zone. And again, that's it's a statement that's difficult to really pin down, but I believe that the infrastructure types in a commercial zone would basically be similar in character versus the infrastructure types that might be designated in most of the residential areas of the town of St. John. Unfortunately, there's no guidance either in case law or anything really to further define or interpret that provision of the Indiana Code that establishes what those requirements are for establishing separate impact zones.
So Fishers did have 4 separate zones, and now only has one, and we're not sure why. Is that correct?
No, Noblesville.
Noblesville, okay.
Noblesville has separate, not Fisher.
But we're not really sure why they changed, correct?
Yes, I have no information as to why in 2011, when the city of Noblesville created their impact fee ordinance and established these different zones within its municipal boundaries, and then, more recently has not, kept those separate zones intact. Just in looking at the map, so I was able to look at the city of Noblesville's maps that were created establishing these different impact zones. And to me, it seemed that they were essentially designating commercial areas and their downtown area, and making distinctions with most of their residential areas within their municipal corporate boundaries.
Well, one comment I would have here is that we really don't have a whole hell of a lot of commercial. So how much of an impact on the amount of money collected would there be by having a separate zone? Number one. And number two, we've talked offline with Brian that the council wants to have some leeway to be able to forgive this fee somewhat or lessen it in certain commercial situations where they, for instance, they're bringing a lot of jobs into town, and so they request a reduction. So I'm not sure we want to spend a lot of money or a lot of time discussing this, but I might be overlooking something.
Well, I cannot address if let's say there's a separate impact zone created for the Highway 41 corridor. I really can't provide any insight as to how that would impact the calculation of the impact fee for the town as a whole, or for other impact zone if it's a residential zone. I think that would be borne out in the calculations that the ARS group would do based on the data that would be derived from the determination of these different impact zones. And so certainly if you have a much smaller impact zone for a commercial area with much fewer roads and bridges, then that will certainly have a different calculation than if you expand an impact zone to include a much wider swath of 41 and much more roadway and bridges. But what I can answer, or what I can touch upon, and this is included in the email that I'd sent to Brian and was shared, I think it's important to distinguish the concept of a waiver from an appeal, because the state statute provides that and makes no reference to waivers, but it does provide a mechanism for appeals from a town's calculation of the road impact fee. And so generally speaking, the state statute provides that there's established an impact fee review board. When the ordinance is created, there would be established this review board, the impact fee review board, which is 3 citizen members. And generally, when a developer would come to the town, and this is what I found from my findings of those suburban Indianapolis communities, the town will first calculate what that impact fee will be. And if the developer believes that there perhaps is some error in the basis of the calculation or some other basis, rational basis, for a reduction in the amount of that calculated fee, they can present their argument, if you will, which would be backed by their engineers' calculations of the EDUs and the equivalent daily units of traffic, which may be considered by the impact fee review board. And so basically then the board would conduct a hearing, would review the materials that have been submitted, and can make an adjustment as the impact fee review board would determine to be appropriate based on the presentation of those facts. And so that appeal process, I refer to it as an appeal process, is really different than a waiver, because I think a waiver suggests that perhaps the town council could simply say, well, we're going to waive the impact fee on this development. And there's really nothing in the Indiana code that would allow that to occur. And I'm not aware that any of the communities that have adopted road and bridge impact fees have done anything like that. But through this mechanism of an appeal, there may be some reduction that could be made to the calculation of the fee, after a hearing has been conducted and after the developer has presented some evidence as to why there should be, considered that reduction. And as Brian alluded to earlier, before the meeting, or right when the meeting was beginning, in the city of Fishers, in their ordinance, they have a provision that basically provides, and I'll read it to you. It says, upon conclusion of the presentation of evidence, the Fishers Impact Fee Review Board shall make a determination not more than 30 days after the hearing upon facts presented, and may make such adjustments in the impact fee as they believe are appropriate under the circumstances, if any. So that does provide a fairly wide area of latitude for the impact fee review board to consider an adjustment, perhaps even beyond the calculations that are submitted by the developer's engineer as to why the fees should be reduced.
Excuse me, on July 21st, the city of Fishers, one of the documents you sent us did exactly that. It reduced the fee from $35,000 to $11,000. And it was based on some subjective input from the council.
Oh, yeah, okay, so is that a document that I provided, or is that?
It's what came in the packet. It's the City of Fishers Impact Fee Review Board, dated July 21st, 2016. An applicant came in, made his case, and at the end of the meeting, they just made an adjustment.
Well, let me see if I can pull that up for a moment.
It's a two-page document.
Yeah, is this I'm sorry, the City of Fishers Impact Fee Review Board meeting minutes?
Yes. They brought up a number of concerns about future uses and transfer of property and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, they gave them a reduction in fee.
Right, that was not done by the town council, though. That was done by their Impact Fee Review Board.
So Adam, are you making a distinction between an appeal is done through the review board, but a waiver would be more likely done through the council? Is that the distinction you're making here?
No. So what the distinction I'm trying to make is I'm not aware of anything in the Indiana code that allows a waiver of an impact fee. If the impact fee is established, then anytime a building permit is issued, the town would do their calculation and determine what that impact fee will be. And if a developer or an owner wishes to appeal the calculation of that impact fee, it has a mechanism to do so through the Impact Fee Review Board. And that's the appeal process that I described earlier. Mm-hmm. So I think what Dennis suggested in that document, the meeting minutes of July 21st of 2016, that's a meeting of the Impact Fee Review Board after the petitioner made a request to reduce the amount of road and bridge impact fee calculated for his proposed 3,800 square foot medical dental office building. And it goes through the calculations of how they were derived, the rate, and then it also identifies the items that were presented by the dentist, Dr. Klaus, as to why there should be some adjustment for that. And it does appear that in those meeting minutes, they made a motion to reduce the fee from $35,878 to $11,699 based on information provided during the hearing. And so that was essentially their appeal process.
Adam, does the town council have ultimate say-so versus the review board? Or is the review board the final word?
Yes, so in my opinion, the review board is the final say. That's why the ordinance is it must require that there be an impact fee review board, and they alone are charged with the authority to make any adjustments to the impact fee that's calculated by the town.
I think that's a real important, process to understand, because therefore, in some cases, the town council can overrule about anything. But what you're saying is, by statute, they cannot overturn anything the review board comes up with. So therefore, you would have to lobby the review board in order to get things to go the way the town wanted. Agreed?
Well, I can't say about lobbying, but I think that you're correct that the town council would not have authority to overrule a decision of the impact fee review board. It's not like, petitions to change the zone maps where the plan commission makes a recommendation, either favorable or unfavorable, which ultimately then goes to the town council. It's not like that at all. The statute simply provides that the impact fee review board can make these adjustments based on the information that's presented. And so I don't believe that the town council would have the final authority or final say on that determination.
Well, that cements your statement then that you highlighted in your email. And that answers the question that I had about, does the town council hold the ultimate power in all cases? And you're saying no, currently it does not. So, understood.
The review board, the way I understand it, is their work is basically technical. And they have to look at that medical facility, probably brought in documentation saying our facility is going to produce this many traffic, which is much less than the number of traffic that the town had calculated. And the review board looked at it, the document convinced them, and therefore that technical review allowed them to multiply a less number of traffic by the base EDU and come up with a $11,000 fee. So it is a rational technical review process, not a waiver.
I think the choice of words using waiver and appeal are important in this particular case, whereas before, I think Paul and I both were using the word waiver to actually mean the fact that we were going to basically decide what the fee should be based on. It's going to bring jobs to town. It's going to bring business to town. It's, that type of consideration. What Adam is basically telling us is that the review board gets the final say, and that's based on appeal, not on a waiver or a variance. So in other words, it's not like a planning commission and the town council gets the final word. You just clarified the town council does not control the review board's decision. So that's important.
Adam, this is Dennis. Are you saying that if you have two zones, that the funds collected in each zone must be used only in those zones? Or are they put into a common pot of money to use everywhere?
Good question.
You're
We're
on
not
mute.
hearing you, Adam.
I do not know, Adam, you may want to, check this, but as far as I know, I'm not aware of any sort of case in Indiana, whether or not, they followed that sort of guidelines, but in other states that allow for multiple zones, typically the fees that are collected for one zone cannot be transferred to another zone.
Oh, well, that's a complication.
Yeah, that's not something we definitely need to consider it. That's for sure.
Yeah, again,
that
I
might
don't
be-
know what the case law is in Indiana, but in other states, I believe that provision is there that I've seen.
That might explain why there's only one zone. If you have a small zone with a high fee and you can't use the money to do anything,
What's the sense?
That's probably why Noblesville recombined all of its districts into one, or all of its zones into one, because it limits the flexibility in the use of the funds based on where the impacts in town really are.
That's what I asked Adam before we started today, before you arrived. I basically gave him that question was, why did they combine them all then? What's the reasoning behind why they did it? You may have hit the nail right on the head. We'll wait for him to verify it.
If he ever gets his voice back. No, we're still not hearing you, Adam.
You're muted again.
No, I can see his mic going on and off, but we're not hearing him either way. So something technical has happened. But we are getting close to 12. Adam, by nod of head, was there anything else you wanted to highlight before we wrap up today? Okay, so I guess we can chew on this for a while.
Donna, this is Craig. One thing real quick.
I'm sorry, what, Craig?
Donna, I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. I personally know the planning director for Noblesville. I can also reach out to her. I've known her for many years. We served on a state board together for many years. I can reach out to her, Sarah Reed, and find out why they did that.
That'd be great. That was going to be
Absolutely.
the question I was going to ask Adam. So, okay. So why don't we just, wait until next time to conclude this conversation? Does anybody else have any comments at this point in time before we adjourn? Somebody want to move to adjourn?
so moved.
Second?
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.